Shalom. I have a lot on my mind lately, and there's just been a lot, a lot to contemplate, to really pray about, to take action on. I appreciate all your prayer. This is one of the topics from several people I've run across on fake book that when the resurrection event already happened. But I think more so something extraordinary happened, and you know we don't even see it. Like in Genesis 3, the good old King's English. It's too bad I don't have Everett Fox's translation. What I wouldn't give for a good Hebrew translation. And Nahash was more crafty than all the lives of the field which Jehovah Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, "Is it true that Elohim has said, 'Do not eat of every tree of the garden'?" See, this is the question, right? Is it true that Jehovah said he shall not ever become a man? Is it true that he said that an innocent man cannot die for the wicked? Actually, let me go to another site that might make this easier to look at. And what's another one? So this is what I call a couplet, right? So this is verses that all have the same sort of content, and really some of these can be taken alone because they're in Torah as mitzvot, commandments, like Exodus 23:7. Stay away from a false charge. Do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not justify the guilty. And this is, if you look at the next verse, it's connected to this. Verse 8. Why did it do that? Oops, I take no bribe. What's a bribe? A bribe is a free gift. It's something you receive because not by your merit, but somebody gives you a gift to overlook sin. And this is one of the reasons, I don't trust all of Tanakh, because there are things in Tanakh that don't add up. For a bribe blinds those who have sight and perverts the words of the righteous. Think about like Christianity. You've received grace because the innocent man was murdered for your sin, and now you take that bribe and you overlook that wicked act, and you attack those who are trying to righteously pursue Jehovah alone. That's another example. I've heard recently, like some of these people that deny Paul, but then they tell me he died in place of Israel. How can he do that when it's the same thing? It's an innocent man dying for the guilty, Israel. It can't happen. Well, I said, well, how can Israel remarry? Because it says he can. Like, look at Jeremiah 3 in the entire context. You have to realize that sometimes things are spoken parabolically. And Christians will do this all day long when you talk about their theophagic, disgusting vampire communion. Oh, it's not real blood, it's an allegory. But when it comes to the marriage of the Almighty God, the incorruptible God, to the tribe of Israel, well, that's literal. Come on, guys. Elohim said, if a man puts away his wife, and she goes from him and becomes another man's, does he return to her again? Would not that land be made greatly unclean? But you have committed whoring with many lovers. And would you return to me, declares Jehovah? Lift up your eyes to the bare heights and see, where have you not lain with men? See, their assumption is that because the divorce happened, that she went and made a covenant with another man, with an idol. But this is impossible. It's not what contextually what's being said. Even if we want to make it more literal, that Jehovah is actually married to the tribe of Israel. Besides the ways you've set for them, like an Arabian in the wilderness, you made the land unclean with your whorings and your evil. Therefore the showers have been withheld, and there has been no latter rain. You've had a whore's forehead, and you refuse to be ashamed. Shall you not from now on cry to me, my father? Oh, you are the guide of my youth. Does one bear a grudge forever? Does one keep it to the end? So you have spoken and done the evils that you could. And Jehovah said to me in the days of Yoshayahu, the sovereign, have you seen the backsliding Israel has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there committed whoring. And it's interesting how often, this activity is connected to trees. And that's why I was getting back to Genesis 3, right? And we'll get there, how, like, something Father has shown me recently. Is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? Back in the garden, the trees, choosing between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're committed whoring. And after she has done all these things, I said, return to me. You see, even before we get to verse 8, what is Jehovah saying to the whoring, backsliding Israel? Return to me. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Yehodah saw it. And I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. So some of these people who come out of Paul, they take a Romans 7 view that he died so that Israel can be remarried. Now, they'll say, oh, it's not a Romans 7 view, but it absolutely is. And this is what Paul is saying in Romans 7. Now, you don't take the same interpretation he does, but it's still nonsense, as we just read from Exodus 23:7. An innocent man cannot die for the righteous. He cannot die to justify the wicked. Israel is wicked, so how does his death justify them? And we'll get to more of these passages too. They say the same thing. But also read the context. Does the certificate of divorce mean that they can't return, or is Jehovah trying to make a point of how sinful they've become, that it would defile the land for them to come back now? If he was a man. You see? Hosea 11:9. Jehovah is not a man. He's not a man. So he's not actually married. It's an analogy. And this is like the same thing you see in Hosea. That Jehovah asked him to marry a whoring wife who kept whoring and had to be rescued and returned to Hosea. And Hosea was a prophet for Israel. Yet her treacherous sister Yehuda did not fear, but went and committed whoring too. And it came to be, although her frivolous whoring, that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and wood. Again, this common denominator, the stone and the wood. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Yehuda has not turned to me with all her heart, but falsely declares Jehovah. See, you can say you've returned to Yehuda, but if it's not with all your heart, if you're serving another master, double-minded, and that's with the garden again, right? Here comes Nahash. Is it true that Elohim said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And Jehovah said to me, backsliding Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Yehuda. Now look at verse 12. This is why he doesn't have to die. I mean, we already established he can't. But in the same context of Jeremiah 3, it shows he does not have to. This debunks whether or not you believe in Paul. If you believe in Paul, this destroys Pauline theology. Go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, return, O backsliding Yisrael. So he's telling them they can return. Return, O backsliding Israel, declares Jehovah. I shall not look on you in displeasure, for I am a lovingly committed, declares Jehovah. And I do not bear a grudge forever. Remember what he said? He was comparing what a man would do to what God does, to Jehovah. Does one bear a grudge forever? Does one keep it to the end? He does not bear a grudge forever. What does he say in verse 13? Only acknowledge your crookedness, because you have transgressed against Jehovah your Elohim, and have scattered your ways to strangers under every green tree. You have not obeyed my voice, declares Jehovah. Return, O backsliding children. I mean, if he's declaring this in the same context of the divorce, it means that Israel can return. And he doesn't say anything about Yeshua. No sacrifice. No innocent man dying so they can return. He just declares, acknowledge your crookedness, because you have transgressed against Jehovah. Return, O backsliding children, declares Jehovah, for I shall rule over you, and shall take you, one from a city, and two from a clan, and shall bring you back to Zion. Hallelujah. Now, let's go over other reasons in Deuteronomy 27:25. Cursed is the one who takes a bribe, grace, to strike down an innocent life. Then all the people shall say, Amen. The blessings and the curses. And in the next verse, it says, cursed is the one who does not acknowledge us all this to do it. And we're going to get to that. Oh, yes. Because one of the things Father's shown me is how connected all forms of Christianity are to the Illuminati, to Freemasonry, to the Masonic keystone. And they know Hebrew. You can see it in lots of construction around the world. This is their precious cornerstone. Hidden knowledge. And each of these represents something. Who was deceived in the garden? The woman. Nahash went to the woman first and offered her a bribe. What was that bribe? The woman said to Nahash, "We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die." And Nahash said to the woman, "You shall certainly not die, for Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall become like Elohim, knowing good and evil." Secret knowledge. The woman. Now let's go to the book of John. Chapter 20. Early in the morning, on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Miriam from Magdala came to the tomb. She sees that the stone had been rolled away from the tomb, so she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Yeshua loved, and she tells them, "They've taken the master out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." See, Jehovah would never be in a tomb. And this is why it's so blasphemous to say he was Jehovah. But if he's not Jehovah, he's a second master. And this is what he says in John 14:1. You believe in God, believe also in me. That means they're separate beings. Then Peter and the other disciples set out, going to the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and arrived at the tomb first. Leaning in, he sees the linen strips lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter comes following him and entered the tomb. He looks upon the linen strips there and the face cloth that had been on his head. It was not lying with the linen strips, but was rolled up in a place by itself. So then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also entered, and he saw and believed. For they did not understand from Scripture that Yeshua must rise from the dead, because Scripture doesn't say that. And even the creator of the Green's literal translation acknowledges this when Paul says this. Scripture does not say this. So the disciples went back to their own homes. But Miriam stood outside the tomb weeping. As she was weeping, she bent down to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, while Yeshua's body had been lying. "Woman, why are you crying?" they said to her. She says, "Because they took away my master, and I don't know where they've put him." After she said these things, she turned around, and she sees Yeshua standing there, yet she did not know it was Yeshua. And Yeshua said to him, "Woman, why are you weeping? What are you looking for?" Thinking he's the gardener, and everything is intentional. And even these Greek writers, they didn't know this because Jehovah put the lying spirit into their pen, that they would test you. Here in the garden again, with the man telling you what? John 6:55. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him, just as the living Father sent me, and I live because the Father. So the one who eats of me will also live because of me. You see what he's saying? The same thing as Nahash. And we know what he's talking about is forbidden. That just was talking about this. When Protestants, you bring this up to Messianics, to Christians, to Paul deniers, they'll all say the same thing. "Oh, you're an idiot. He's not being literal." Oh, but he is with the marriage, right? The problem is that this is literal, but the bigger problem, even if it's allegory, is what he's describing here is what happened in the garden. You see, he's telling you to drink something that Father tells you not to drink, to eat something that Father tells you not to drink, and then telling you that he is the manna that came down from heaven, lying to you. If you eat of him, you will live forever. You shall become like the Elohim. And this is the appeal to our pride. And it comes through who? In the garden, talking to Nahash. Remember what I talked about with the inverted triangle? Isaiah 5:20 to 23. To those who call evil good and good evil, who present darkness as light and light as darkness, who present bitter as sweet and sweet as bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Who's clever? Second Corinthians 12:16. But be that as it may, I did not burden myself. I didn't burden you myself. Nevertheless, crafty fellow that I am, I caught you with trickery. This is Paul speaking to them, admitting his lie. And let's look that up, because I guarantee you crafty and clever are the same words.
Strong's G 3835, panorgas. Panorgas.
Skillful, clever. See? He was clever in his own sight, wise in his own eyes, like Nahash. And I remember a lot of Matthew 10:16. So it's kind of interesting. He says, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." Because this is how they catch you in the net of Christianity. They act like they're wise as the serpent in the garden, telling you to do what? To eat of his flesh and drink of his blood. They become part of Nahash. And this is why he says to them, in Matthew 19:12, to cut off the seed of man, right? For there are eunuchs who are born that way from the mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made that way by men, and there are eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of Uranus. Yes, it's not Shamayim, it's not God they're becoming eunuchs for, but the Greek god Uranus. He who accepts this, let him accept it. And this is another one, when you present it to any Christian, show them how it contradicts Torah, they won't accept the truth because they're wise in their own eyes. As it says here, just like Nahash, wise in his own eyes and clever in his own sight. But look at what it goes on to say. Oi to those who are heroes at drinking wine. Drinking your blood communion. There you go. Valiant in mixing drinks. Who justify the wicked for a bribe. So, who says this? Now to him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. What is he saying? That those who do what's right, it becomes debt. And we'll get to the power of this statement in the next verse. But to him that works not, but believeth on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. That doesn't sound like Jehovah from these passages we're reading. Proverbs 17:15. Acquitting the wicked and condemning the righteous, both are an abomination to Adonai, Jehovah. Paul just did both in one fell swoop. He condemned the righteous and he justifies the wicked, the ungodly. It's the same word.
Strong's G 765. Asabase. Asabase.
Asabase. And guess where that's used in the Tanakh? Exodus 23:7. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked, the Asabase. It's inverted from what Paul says. And directly so. And the problem is, once you dump Paul, what are you left with? You're left with the death of an innocent man, a murder. You don't have to call it sacrifice, even though, it still is. You're still sacrificing him, even though you don't call it that. It's still human sacrifice and it's still murder. And you're still trying to justify the wicked through this act. That you can eat the flesh of man and drink his blood and be justified. Psalm 49:7. Or those trusting in their wealth, boasting about their great choices. That's weird. Oh, it's verse 8. No man can redeem his brother or give God a ransom for him. So, even if you reject Paul and you believe that he died so that Israel can be redeemed, ransoming them for God to marry Israel again, it's impossible. It's not. I mean, you can believe something, but if it contradicts a multitude of witnesses, then clearly you need to reflect on what you believe on. And this is what I'm trying to get at. All of the New Testament is teaching what Nahash said in the garden. All of the New Testament was the foundation for the esoteric religions of Freemasonry, the Illuminati, all of it. Why do they have this upside down triangle? I haven't told you yet. What I've talked about is that you have two women, the woman in the Garden of Eden and the woman in the garden outside of the tomb. And Nahash came to both of them and told them that you shall be as God if you eat of my flesh and drink my blood. Jeremiah 31:30. Behold, the days are coming, it is a declaration of Jehovah, when I will make a new covenant. The versing is so off on that verse translation. The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are blunted. Rather, each will die for his own iniquity. And this is the same thing we see in Exodus 32:33, right? Jehovah said to Moses, whoever sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. He can't die for us. It's not possible. I know you want to believe that, he's a war hero jumping on a grenade for you, but it's not possible. It can't redeem you. Fathers are not put to death for their children, and the children are not put to death for their fathers. So he cannot die for the sins of the father. Which is also what Ezekiel says. Ezekiel 18, yet you say, why does the Son not bear the iniquity of the Father with him? When the Son has done what is lawful and right, has kept all my statutes, has done them, he shall surely live. The soul that sins, he will die. The Son will not bear the iniquity of the Father with him. Well, what about Isaiah 53, where it says he bears the iniquity? No, you see, this is important to understand. If you're not reading context, you're going to come out supporting your pretext all of the time. Isaiah 52, it starts out with what? Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted, just as many were appalled at you. His appearance was disfigured more than any man, his form more than the sons of men. So he will sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouth because of him. For what he had been told them they will see, and what they do not perceive they will perceive. So the one speaking in the next chapter is the kings of other nations about Israel. And this is about how Jehovah allowed Israel to be afflicted because of their sin. If you look at the next chapter, 54. Sing, barren one, who has not given birth, burst into singing and shout, you who have not travailed. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married one, says Jehovah. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch out your tabernacle curtains. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, for you will spread out to the right hand and to the left. Your offspring will possess the nations and will resettle the desolate cities. See, this is repeated so often in this context of Isaiah 40 to 61. It completely debunks the idea that this text was about the first century. The cities were no longer desolate in the first century. They became desolate. This prophecy wasn't about the first century. It's about the exile and the return to the land. Fear not, for you will not be ashamed, nor cringe, for you will not be disgraced. For you will forget the shame of your youth, and you will remember the reproach of your widowhood no more. For your Maker is your husband. Jehovah Sabaoth is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He will be called God of all the earth. For Adonai has called you back like a wife deserted and grieved in spirit, like a wife of one's youth that is rejected, says your God. You see? Jehovah Zaot is the husband of Israel. And what does it say? That someone had to die? No, the suffering servant, the afflicted one, does not die. And he repeatedly says that here in chapter 54. For Jehovah has called you back. For a brief moment, I deserted you, but I will regather you with great compassion. See, this proves that Isaiah 53 and 54 are talking about the same thing from different perspectives. In a surge of anger, I hid my face from you a moment, but with everlasting kindness, I will have compassion on you, says Adonai, Jehovah, your Redeemer. For this is like the waters of Noah to me. For as I swore that the waters of Noah should no more cover the earth, so I have sworn that I will not be angry with you, nor will I rebuke you. See, this is the constant inversion of the New Testament. Because the JC guy, he says that his return will be like the days of Noah. And every Christian believes this means that a rise in wickedness will take place. But Isaiah, he says that the redemption of Israel is like the days of Noah. That just as he swore that the waters will no longer destroy all life on earth, he has sworn that he will not be angry with Israel forever. And this is so important to understand. Those of you expecting a rise in wickedness You'll listen to Nahash and those that serve him in knowledge. They've eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they know his teachings. When you see the rise in wickedness, you'll turn the other cheek, and you will not resist evil because your master told you not to. Though the mountains depart and the hills be shaken, my love will not depart from you, nor will my covenant of peace be shaken, says Jehovah, who has compassion on you. Afflicted one, storm-tossed, unconsoled, behold, I set your stones in antimony. Does a person have stones? Lay your foundations with sapphires. He's talking about the chosen city. Make your pinnacles of rubies, your gates of crystal, and your walls of precious stones. All your children will be taught by Jehovah, and your children will have great shalom. In righteousness you will be established. You will be far from oppression, you will not fear, and from terror, for I will come near you. Behold, anyone fiercely attacking is not from me. Do I need to read that again? Whoever stirs up strife with you will fall because of you. Behold, I created the smith who blows the fires of coals and produce a weapon for its work, and I created the destroyer to ruin. He is the creator of good and evil. Hasatan has no power of his own. No weapon formed against you will prosper. Think about what that means. No weapon formed against you will prosper. In context of Isaiah 53, the suffering, afflicted servant will not die. The weapon formed against Israel was made by Jehovah, but it will not prosper. It will not kill Israel. You will condemn every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of Adonai's servants, and their vindication is from me. It is a declaration of Adonai. The Son cannot bear the iniquity of the Father, nor will the Father bear the iniquity of the Son with him. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked will be on him. But if the wicked turns from all his sins that he has committed, keeps all my Torah, and does what is lawful and right, he shall surely live. He will not die. Now think about the difference here. Paul and Jesus tell you to break the Torah to live. To drink his blood is to break Torah. You say, well, Jesus didn't teach against the Torah. Drinking blood is against Torah. It doesn't matter if it's allegory. And we went over that in Isaiah 5:20, right? Woe to those who call evil good. It's evil to drink blood. It's evil to eat the flesh of man. And you want to sit there and call that good and blessed, that you will have life because you commit sin against the Father? Woe to those who justify the wicked through the murder of the innocent, through your bribe. Well, I don't believe Paul. Okay, you do. You just don't acknowledge that you do, because without Paul, the rest of the New Testament doesn't make any sense. Paul's influence inspired the whole New Testament. He is, let's go to the verse, 1 Corinthians 3:10. According to the grace of God, which was given unto me, as a wise, remember, wise in their own eyes, right? Master builder. He's laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he builds, right? So what is that word? And Christians just overlook this. He called himself the architecton.
Strong's G 753, architecton. Architecton.
The architect of your faith was a master builder. The woman was in the garden, and what Nahash was trying to do was actually trying to free your mind. This is what they believe. This is why they venerate the woman. This is what got the Templars in trouble. Their worship of the feminine in bringing them hidden knowledge from Nahash. And it gets even more than that. Because what does this nation worship? Libertas and justice for all, right? The end of God's law, replacing it with man's wisdom. The end of God's law. Yes, that's what Paul is saying. That's what Jesus is saying. Matthew 15. It is not that goes into the mouth that defiles a man. Back to the garden, right? I mean, how can it be true that, if you eat of the tree of good and evil, that it will defile you? It will surely not defile you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. What comes out of your mouth? Wisdom of your mind. And if it's not their esoteric wisdom, they see it as defiling you. Look at 2 Corinthians 3. Who also made us able ministers of this new covenant, not of the letter. And this is so interesting, that Christians are so contradictory and they don't read the text. And I've taught many times, and I prayed about this, like actually going over and doing an exegesis of what the New Testament is actually teaching, if that would be useful to free people from the fisher of men. Because it doesn't teach what you've been taught. It doesn't teach sola scriptura, as an example. Because Paul just tells you that his wisdom is not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. But of course, he's not talking about his own text, but the Torah. And he makes that clear in the next verse. But if the ministration of death, written and engraven in stones, was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, which glory was done away with. The ministration of death, written and engraved on stone. You have to have eyes to see. He's giving you liberty from the law. And it's not just Paul, as I've said. It's not. Look at John 2. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. that verse, I don't remember. I think it's Deuteronomy 14. Yeah. And if the distance is so great for you that you are not able to bring the tithe, since the place where you, Jehovah, your Elohim, chose to set his name for you is too far away from you when Jehovah, your Elohim, blesses you, then you shall exchange it for money, bind the money in your hand, and go to the place which Jehovah, your God, chooses. And you may spend the money for whatever your heart desires, for oxen, for sheep, for wine, for strong drink, or whatever your heart desires. And there you shall eat in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim, and be blessed, you and your household. But in John 2, you see these people doing what the Torah allows. And, I highly doubt they were actually in the temple. I think it means the temple square. And, I've talked about how I think the stone temple is also pagan. And that's a sign of Freemasonry as well. But right now we're talking about this specific topic. Torah allows the people to exchange money for an offering. And no, I don't think they were actually in the temple. There wouldn't be room, number one. And number two, how would you have all of these lambs in the temple beyond the point where they're sacrificed? It doesn't make any sense. So he takes a scourge of cords and then whips them, proving again he's not the servant of Isaiah 53, right? Because Isaiah 53, it says of him what? He did not open his mouth, which, he repeatedly does. And he had done no violence. I don't know how you see a scourge of cords being thrown at your face and saying, no, this man doesn't do any violence. And these offerings were allowed by Torah. Torah says they can come and bring these to the chosen city and exchange it for an offering. But you want to believe you're free from the law. Oh, you are free indeed by the woman deceived in the garden. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May it never be. Rather, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. See what they do here, and I've seen many Christians say this, as they invert the trees. No longer is the Torah the tree of life, as it says in Deuteronomy 30. The Torah becomes the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is how the serpent deceives you. If you eat of the Torah, you shall die. And Paul repeatedly hammers this home. And we saw already how, JC does the same thing. What you put in your mouth doesn't defile you. Castrate yourself for the kingdom of Uranus. Because in castration, you free yourself from the bondage of reproduction. This goes back to the feminine. What did all of these cults have in common? Human sacrifice. Killing the firstborn for their gods and goddesses. For libertas. And this is something Father keyed me off. abortion is human sacrifice. And some Christians acknowledge this, but they don't reflect and see how they are also promoting the murder of an innocent. Abortion is human sacrifice for what? The goddess of freedom, libertas. Pro-choice, freedom, free from the law of sin and death. It doesn't defile you what you put in your mouth. Eat the placenta of your firstborn son or daughter. You know, a placenta is mostly blood, right? It's just so perverted where we've gone because, these people, they control the narrative. They know what the New Testament is actually teaching. And not just Paul, the whole damn thing, the whole New Testament. And we'll get to this because this is also based on the same false premises. Instead of letting go of the thorn of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you cling to it so you never find true life. You just keep searching for esoteric truths, not realizing they depend on you being deceived because they are crafty. And they tell you, be as crafty as the serpent, as wise as the serpent. Wise in your own eyes, never seeing the truth, never recognizing the cross. Oh, the depths you want to go to for your secret wisdom. So this tower in Rhode Island, I believe Scott was telling us the truth here. It probably was built by the Templars. But there's an interesting thing he says here, right? So they have the fertility egg, the worship of Ishtar, Easter. But not just Easter, it's also Venus. It's the feminine. The inverted triangle is the feminine. It's like acknowledging that Nahash was telling the truth. That's what they're saying. If you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall become like a god. And that's what he says throughout the book of John. There's a point in here, I forgot where it's at. Where they do the alignment of Venus. And Venus represents the feminine to these people. Oh, that's why I'm not seeing it. That's only a clip from it.
Previously
Yeah, so check this out. They do a mock Venus alignment of the fall and the spring, and look at what it makes. I think I went too far. It only shows it very briefly.
All right, we're going to see the light come through. You're going to love it. The Templars would design this into a structure like this.
I know, they were the only one with laser light shows.
The birth and the death, the cross, esoteric religion, that's its roots. And, you know, it goes back to, like, do you want to be free from the Torah? Do you really think that's freedom? Look at the wilderness. It's so powerful. When there's no Torah, people serve their hearts, crucifying their children for their own wickedness. The golden calf, the secret knowledge, the elevation of the feminine. I don't think that they can be made any clearer than this. But Father has put some interesting things in the Tanakh, like 1 Samuel 11. Nahash, the Ammonite. What's an Ammonite? They're considered fatherless because they were conceived through the sin of Lot having sex with his daughter. Nahash, the serpent. Nahash, the serpent. What? The fatherless? Yes. Came up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. And the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, cut a covenant with us, and we will serve you. But Nahash the Ammonite said to them, I will cut with it on you this condition, that I will gouge out the right eye of every one of you, thus I will make a reproach on all of Israel. The right eye, specifically the freaking right eye. Matthew 5:29. But if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. Gouge out your right eye for him. For it is better for you to lose one of your body parts than your whole body to be thrown into Gehenna. You really think the Father wants you to defile your body for a covenant relationship? And, you know, to prove that this is, same thing Mr. Paul says. He says, where then is this the sense of blessing you had? For I testify to you, if possible, you would have plucked out your eyes and given them to me. For Nahash, eating his flesh, drinking his blood, so you shall become like a god, but through the justification of murder, sin for sin, secret knowledge of good and evil. This is what you want to follow? Because Rome took these writings and stapled them to the Torah, the sacred writings from Jehovah? Well, I don't. I want to follow Jehovah alone. Shalom.